Hey guys, we're back with video 2 for the cognition unit. In the previous video, we talked about all things mental concepts. So if you are still confused about that, or you are starting with this video for some reason, go back and watch the previous video so that you're not lost as we move into decision making. So, as promised, this video is going to be about decision making in the brain. We'll talk about both the parts of the brain that allow us to make decisions, as well as the ways that we do actually make decisions, whether that's algorithms, heuristics, insight, and how we solve problems. So, this video is going to be a little interactive. I may encourage you to pause the video at times so that you can try to figure things out and make decisions and problem solve. And I'm going to encourage you to do that because it kind of helps with this whole process here. Okay, so let's get into the brain. Bio unit's not too far behind us, so let's kind of dive in again and make sure that we're all on the same page here. So we know that there are certain parts of the brain that really help with decision making, and damage to these areas can really inhibit decision making. Like, can literally render people with the inability to make a decision. Not in the like, oh, I don't know what kind of food I want for dinner, but like legitimately could not pull the trigger and make a decision. So let's kind of go into those because those are really the more interesting ones. So first up, the orbitofrontal cortex. You might remember from our bio unit that the frontal cortex and more specifically the prefrontal cortex are responsible for what we call executive functioning. And part of that is decision making. But a specific part of the prefrontal cortex, the orbitofrontal cortex, which is basically the part of your brain right below your eye or right behind your eye, damage to that, people with damage to that describe very easily the outcomes of various options when presented with, options to choose, and they have to pick one. But they cannot make the decision. So they can say like, oh yeah, this would be a better choice. Yeah, but I don't know which one I want, right? So they can kind of have that inability to make a decision, which is probably really frustrating if you can imagine that. People with damage in the amygdala, which if you remember again from the bio unit, is where a lot of our strong emotional responses are kind of formed and held, and it's the part of our brain that responds to threats. People with damage to the amygdala have issues with considering possible problems or losses. So they might not ever see downsides to the decision, which is interesting that, again, the amygdala responsible for emotional and usually negative emotional content in our thoughts and our reactions, prevents people from seeing the downsides of decisions. Whereas the nucleus accumbens, which is usually part of the reward center of our brain, it makes it difficult for people to see the upsides to things. So they can only focus on the downside. So if you have brain damage at certain parts of the brain, it can really affect the way that we make decisions. Combined, the orbitofrontal cortex, nucleus accumbens, and the amygdala all kind of work together to form what we might call our gut reactions to things. We don't know why, but it's kind of not really sure we want to make this decision this way, or something feels off about that choice, so I'm going to stay away from it, even though if I can't put my finger on it. A lot of evidence shows that those gut reactions are our brain basically eat different parts of our brain, picking up on specific things, and therefore making it harder for us to actually make the decision, or gives us a way to kind of stay away from something that could actually be dangerous. But let's say that you're still tasked with making a decision. Maybe let's say you're trying to make a decision on which college to attend next year. You can go about it a few different ways. One is to determine which is the best, say which college is the best fit. You could use an algorithm. An algorithm is a decision-making process in which you exhaust all possibilities before arriving at the actual solution. So it requires you to look at every single possible outcome and make a determination from it, trying to solve a problem by literally trying every single possible solution. This is how computers work. Computers just are able to do it in a much faster way than humans are, which is why computer algorithms are so important. and also, I guess, dangerous. If you've seen, was it The Social Dilemma? Not Social Network. That's a movie about Facebook. But so let's try a little activity here. So here you've got an example, right? Definitions of algorithms. The positive is that you will always get a solution in terms of the answer because you will try every possible solution. So one of them has to be right. Downside is that they take a long time. So if we use an algorithm approach to figure out what word is in the red there, it would take over 900,000 different possibilities and letter combinations. The good news is that one of those is the correct answer. The bad news is that's really hard for us to do. Computers would be able to do this really quickly, but it takes us a while. So the positive of an algorithm is the fact that we always arrive at a correct solution. The downside is that it takes a long time. So the other type of decision-making process is something called a heuristic. A heuristic is a much simpler way to kind of come about a problem, which is to go off of most likely solutions or things that have worked well in the past. It basically allows us to make a judgment call and then use that to further enhance our understanding or get to the answer of the problem. So why is this guy in the grocery store? So imagine that you're going to a new grocery store. You've never been there before. You don't know where things are. It's not like your local one. And you're looking for, I don't know, what's he looking for there? Orange juice, let's say, or mustard. I don't know. Orange juice. We'll go with orange juice. Even though it looks like he already has some in his cart. Whatever. Doesn't matter. Well, if you're looking for orange juice, an algorithmic approach, so not a heuristic, would be to check every single aisle, to walk up and down every single aisle, staring at every single item, checking to see if it's orange juice. Would you eventually find orange juice? Yes. Would it take you a lot longer than necessary? Yes. But again, you're definitely coming up with the solution. A heuristic approach might say, you know what? Orange juice is probably in the refrigerated aisle, since orange juice usually is in the fridge. Let me go there first. Or let me see, where the drinks are, and then let me go down that aisle, right? There's kind of these mental shortcuts that, allow us to be able to make decisions quickly. The downside here is that you can be wrong, right? Maybe this grocery store, for some reason, stores their orange juice in a totally different section. Maybe they have a section specifically just for cold drinks, and all cold drinks are there. So you're walking down the, refrigerated aisle, and all you're seeing is cheese and butter and stuff. Or you're going down the drink aisle, and all you're seeing is soda. Right? That could lead to you making errors. So heuristics are, the plus side is that they are quick. The downside is that they are error prone. You're more likely to make a error here with a heuristic. So let's go back to our word jumble thing, whatever it is, and apply a heuristic here. So maybe we're looking at this and we're so confused we don't really know what to do. So we might want to throw the S at the end. Maybe it's a plural word, right? And maybe that can help give us an answer here. I don't know. Maybe it does. Maybe it doesn't. But what we can do is we can then just try a number of different scrambles, throwing things together, and eventually get the word activities. So heuristic, right, kind of just allows you to kind of go off the cuff. You're not trying every possible solution, right? You're not starting with the T in the first place and then swapping out every single other letter after that to get to the word, right? You're kind of making guesses and judgments, and that allows you to problem solve, right? That's what heuristics are. Now, these are both different from insight. Insight is a sudden realization of how to solve a problem. It just like all of a sudden things click. This is the light bulb moment for cartoon characters or whatever. That's when the light bulb will pop up, over our heads. It's this kind of sudden rush of, oh, okay, now I know how to do this. that we see in both humans and animals. Here you see, a monkey, a chimp, I think, basically stacking boxes to get to a banana. That's insight. That's problem solving that just kind of, clicks. If you've ever done like word jumbles or crosswords or, other kinds of things where you're staring at it for a while and all of a sudden it just kind of comes to you, that's insight. In fact, I have a bunch of worksheets that I can throw on Schoology, maybe for, small partial credit for completion, that just test your insight, that give you word puzzles and you just kind of figure it out and it comes to you. You could do algorithms to solve them, but insight is just kind of this, like, again, sudden novel realization of a solution. Now, the opposite of insight and problem solving is something that we call fixation. So fixation, or what is also sometimes called functional fixedness, is our inability to see a problem from a fresh perspective. So when you get stuck kind of solving things the way that they've always been solved, but you keep coming up with errors, that's an error in fixation, that you can't find a new way to attack a problem. So I think this is in your book. Well, at least it used to be in the book. I'm not actually too sure now. But the matchstick problem, about arranging 6 matches to form 4 equilateral triangles. I have some other examples here that I'm going to move on to. It's a little bit more interactive. And I'll actually going to ask you to pause the video in a second. So first, let's look at what's called the candle mounting problem. So you're given a box of matches, some thumbtacks, and a candle. And your job is to mount the candle on a bulletin board. So, and then light it. So I'm going to ask you to pause the video now so that you can think of a solution. So go ahead and pause. Okay, so maybe you've thought of ways to, melt the bottom of the candle and just stick it onto the bulletin board, but the weight of the candle is too much that it won't hold. Maybe you thought of tacking it through the wick, but again, that's not going to work if you're going to need to light the candle. The solution is to use the matchbox as a tray and then tack the matchbox onto the bulletin board. Now, the issue, if you couldn't find that solution, if you're having a hard time coming up with it, is because you were fixated, right? Functional fixedness, that the matchbox is just something to hold matches, that you couldn't think of it from an outside the box solution, so that you could then, oh wait, no, this matchbox I could use as like a tray or a platform to put the candle on. So again, right, when we're talking about problem solving, right, that there is this thing called fixedness, specifically functional fixedness, that prevents us from seeing things in a new way. So another example, here we have 2 strings that were together, kind of like a clothesline, that have fallen apart, but you can't reach them, so that you can't like walk them together because they're just too far apart. It is tight across the top, so that's why you can't reach them. So the objects you have are a table, a screwdriver, some matches, and some cotton. So how could the strings be tied together? Again, I'm going to let you think about this now, knowing your new skills of insight and fighting against functional fixedness. So go ahead and pause the video now to find a solution, or to think of a solution. All right, so maybe you came up with a novel way to use the screwdriver. Maybe you attach the screwdriver to the string on the one side. That gave you enough, it's a little bit longer, that allows you to then hold the strings together. Still not enough, right, for you to tie these back together. So you might have to jump up onto the table, right, and use the table as a ladder or a stepping stool. So again, we have different ways of using things, common things. That's what gives us this power over functional fixedness. Okay, I'm going to end with the next couple slides here. So When we're talking about heuristics, remember these are mental shortcuts. There are two that you're going to need to know. There are many different types of heuristics and heuristics that lead to errors. They were discovered, or these two were specifically discovered by Danny Kahneman and Amos Tversky, which actually won them the Nobel Prize in economics of all things, about how people make decisions, and how we're so-called rational, yet we tend to fall for these common thought mistakes. So let's get into those. So let's start with what's called the representativeness heuristic. So if I were to flip a quarter 6 times, which outcome is more likely? 6 tails or 3 heads and 3 tails? Turns out they're exactly equally likely, because each coin flip is its own kind of set that, while it feels right that we would get 3 heads, 3 tails, because we know that coin flips are 50-50, actually it turns out that they are both equally likely. Neither one is more likely than another. That is because of the representativeness heuristic. We make the error here saying that the second option is more likely because it more fits into our idea of what a coin flip is. It represents the typical prototype of an event. So since we know that coin flips are 50-50, that we should expect a coin flip, a series of coin flips, to come out to be about 50-50. So, we feel like the first one's a little bit more random, and therefore that's probably not right, so we go with the second. But it turns out mathematically they're equally likely. In fact, you can use people's representativeness heuristics against them in kind of a magic trick. I do this sometimes, where you could have someone flip a coin, say 20 times in a row, and record what the responses are. And then you could have them, before they do that, they could just write down, imagine you flipped a coin, write down what the responses are, write down 20 fake responses for a coin flip, and then actually do it. And then you, without knowing which one's which, can go around and accurately guess each one correctly, because the coin flips in real life are going to have much more runs of the same thing. You're going to get 5 or 6 heads in a row. Whereas most people, when they're writing down coin flips, they alternate back and forth much more frequently than actually happens in real life. That's because when we're told to write out a coin flip, we're using our representativeness heuristic. Okay, coin flips are 50-50. So, I might go like heads, heads, tails, heads, heads, tails, tails, heads, tails, whatever. But in reality, you're more likely to get, or just as likely to get, I should say, a string of 5 or 6 or 8 heads in a row. That's just the way that the math works. So representativeness heuristic is our inability to, or is our tendency to make a mistake based off of how closely something fits a prototype. That's really the actual definition. So we are more likely to make an error if something fits closer to the prototype, regardless of the math that kind of fits it objectively. So representativeness heuristic. The availability heuristic is another type of error that we tend to make. So which is more frequent? Words that begin with the letter K, or words with K in the third position? So the third letter is K. Again, I'm going to give you a second to think about it. By far, most of us are going to say words beginning with the letter K. But that's wrong. There are actually way more words with K in the third position. What's the deal with this? Well, when we're thinking of words that begin with K, words that begin with K are more easily called to mind than words with K in the third position. It's because we have to think about how words are spelled to figure out if the K is in the third spot. So, we can easily think of words like kitchen and knife and kayak and I don't even know anything. Carrot, like a ring, like a gem, you name it. We can think of a lot of words that begin with K, but words with K in the third position are a little bit harder because, again, it takes us that extra second to think about it. So, we might easily skip over words like cake, right, which has K in the third position. But then we can also have cakes and cake maker, cake, rake, sake, take. You get it. Lake. And then lake, lakes, Laker, Lakers, right? There's many different words that have K in the third position. But again, our mind jumps to the one that's easier, that pops to mind more readily. That's what the availability heuristic is. So the representativeness heuristic is something fits more closely to a prototype that we have in our minds. Availability heuristic is which is more easily recalled, comes to mind. So this is why people tend to drive slower after they witness an accident, because the accident kind of reminds them that they should slow down, right? That scene of an accident is more available to them than the open highway. This is why after like a plane crash, people are more hesitant to fly, because next time they think about planes, they think of the plane crash, and therefore they think that plane crashes are more likely than they are statistically. So again, availability heuristic plays on our search for quick solutions, right? Whatever comes to mind quick, more readily, becomes the thing that drives our decision making. Now, there's another thing that tends to happen too, and I'm going to read to you a scenario here. So, a man has been randomly selected from a sample of 100 people, made up of 70 lawyers and 30 engineers. He's shy, cautious, precise. He shows little interest in politics or sports and spends most of his free time on his favorite hobbies: astronomy, building computers, and solving math problems. Do you think he is a lawyer or an engineer? Most people, based off of that description, will say that this gentleman is an engineer because he follows the kind of what we think of a prototype as an engineer. He likes math problems and solving computers. But this isn't a great guess, because we ignore the fact that I said at the very beginning, that lawyers in this group of 100 people, lawyers outnumber engineers 70 to 30. So that if I'm picking one at random, it's a much higher likelihood that that person is going to be a lawyer than an engineer, right? And certainly we can think of lawyers who like math puzzles and fixing computers, right? That is something that does make sense, even if it seems more prototypically like an engineer. So this is another example of what we would call a representativeness heuristic error, that because of our representativeness heuristic, the examples given seem to fit more of the prototype of an engineer. So we're more likely to say that he's an engineer, because that tendency, that heuristic so much overrides something as basic as the odds being 70-30 that it's going to be a lawyer. In fact, this is so strong that we tend to even forget that those numbers were given in the first place, because of course he's an engineer. He fits the bill. One of the last things I'm going to say here before we switch gears and start talking about language is that there's something called the belief bias, or what we might call belief perseverance, sometimes also called confirmation bias, which we've done on an FRQ, right? So the belief bias is basically our tendency for our pre-existing beliefs to distort our logical reasonings, and can then therefore lead to us sometimes to make improper or invalid conclusions. So if you think of something like, I like this graffiti. It's if we really want to think about it, there's some logical errors here, but it's important to remember that belief bias is something that creeps in, that we want things to confirm our pre-existing beliefs, that we want our beliefs to be justified in some way. So we look for things that do just that. But remember, to be a good psychologist, to be a good critical thinker is to put everything to the test, right? To test our beliefs and try to look at things as objectively as possible. Okay, so here's a little table that I'm ending with that kind of highlights a number of different things around intuition, um, and I think where you can find them in your book. But basically, it's just a number of different terms and things that kind of either play into our intuition or show the errors of our intuition. So that's that for thought. Sorry, this video was a little longer than intended, but there's a lot here. So when we come back, please make sure that you ask me questions about representativeness heuristic and availability heuristic. And we'll do a couple examples in class about how those things work. So in this video, we talked about decision making in the brain. We talked about the difference between an algorithm and difference between algorithm, heuristics, and insight. And we looked at two specific heuristics that we tend to fall prey to when we are making decisions and sometimes lead us astray. So that's this video. Next video, we're going to start talking about language and how how you guys are understanding things that I'm saying right now. So stay tuned for that. Until next video, guys. I'll see you then.